When it comes to education, there's this one huge question we really need to ask ourselves. Are we more focused on the act of teaching itself, or are we focused on the actual outcome of learning? It seems like a small difference, but trust me, that shift in perspective changes absolutely everything. And you know who nailed this idea centuries ago? Benjamin Franklin. He framed it so perfectly. The difference between just remembering a fact and truly learning it, well, it almost always comes down to one thing: involvement. And that simple, powerful idea is right at the heart of what we're going to explore. So, to really get a handle on student-centered learning, or SCL as you'll hear it called, let's start by picturing two very, very different kinds of classrooms. Okay, on one side, you've got the classic teacher-centered model. You probably know this one well. Think of it as the sage on the stage. The teacher is the expert standing at the front, transmitting all this knowledge to the students, who are basically there to absorb it. But then on the other side, you have the student-centered model. This is the guide on the side. Here, the teacher's job completely changes. They become a facilitator, helping students discover and build knowledge for themselves. Now, here's the thing. In the real world, it's almost never one extreme or the other. It's really more of a spectrum, a continuum between these two ideas. The goal of SCL isn't to flip a switch and make every single thing student-led overnight. It's about consciously, intentionally shifting that balance of power and activity toward the learner. So what does it actually mean for learning to be student-centered? Well, it's not just a vague idea. It's defined by a pretty clear set of guiding principles. Let's dig into them. Okay, so thanks to some great work from the European Students' Union, we've got some core principles that really lay it all out. First, SCL is a reflexive process. It's always changing and improving. And this is a big one. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. It has to adapt. It also recognizes that, hey, students have different learning styles, they have different needs, and giving them a choice in what and how they learn is absolutely central to the whole thing. And it doesn't stop there. The principles go on to emphasize that SCL has to take a student's background and their past experiences into account. It's about giving them real control over their own learning journey. And finally, it's all about cooperation. Students and teachers become true partners in the process. And this right here brilliantly sums up the core shift. Principle 8, enabling, not telling. The goal is not just to dump facts from the teacher's brain into the student's notebook. No. The goal is to empower students, to give them the responsibility to think, to analyze, to solve problems, to develop those critical thinking skills they're going to need for the rest of their lives. Okay, that all sounds great on paper, right? But what happens when you actually try this out in a real classroom, especially with a ton of students? Let's look at this really fascinating case study from back in 1997. At the University of Waikato in New Zealand, they did something pretty bold. They took a huge first-year management course. We're talking about 250 students, and they got rid of all the traditional lectures completely. Instead, they had students work in small, independent learning groups. So, how did the students react? Well, this feedback is really telling. As you can see, students generally found the course enjoyable, and they overwhelmingly agreed that, yeah, they needed to do the prep work to make it useful. But look at this last bar. A pretty big chunk of them still said they'd rather just have lectures. And this points to a massive challenge, right? Learning isn't just about what's most effective. It's also about what's familiar and comfortable. And getting past that comfort zone is a huge hurdle for everyone involved. That case study is the perfect lead-in to our next section. Let's tackle some of the most common myths and misunderstandings that are always swirling around student-centered learning. Because SCL is such a big shift, it's no surprise that a lot of misconceptions have popped up. I mean, just look at this mind map. It gives you a sense of just how many there are. So let's take a minute and clear a few of the big ones up. First up, the big one. If the focus is all on the student, does that mean the teacher just becomes irrelevant? The answer is a hard no. Absolutely not. The teacher's role isn't diminished at all. If anything, it's transformed. They stop being just the provider of content and become something way more critical, a facilitator, a resource, and a guide for the student's own journey. It's a much more complex and, honestly, a more vital role than ever before. Okay, next myth. Is CSIN kind of soft on content? Do students actually learn less stuff because they aren't just memorizing facts from a lecture? In reality, it's pretty much the complete opposite. SCL is all about deep learning over surface learning. When students are actively applying ideas and solving problems, they often get a much more profound, longer-lasting understanding of the material than they ever would from just trying to memorize it. And a final, very practical concern. I'm sure some of you are thinking this. Do you need a classroom full of iPads and a huge budget to make this happen? Well, here's the good news. While tech can definitely help, it is not a requirement. The real engine of SCL is just an innovative approach to teaching. It's about rethinking the whole learning process, and that can be done with a little creativity and the resources you probably already have. So, after busting the myths and seeing it in practice, let's get right to the bottom line. Why does this shift towards student-centered learning really truly matter? It really all boils down to three foundational pillars. First, it's about empowering students, right? Giving them real ownership of their own education. Second, that empowerment has this huge ripple effect that changes how we design curriculum, how we teach, and how we assess what's been learned. And third, all of it is built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect between teachers and students. And the ultimate goal? What's the point of all this? It's to move beyond just creating good students and to start developing intellectually independent individuals. People who have the skills and the mindset to learn, to adapt, and to thrive in a world that, let's be honest, is defined by constant, non-stop change. It's funny, we started with a quote from Benjamin Franklin, and we'll end with an even older piece of wisdom from Confucius that captures the exact same timeless truth. It's such a powerful reminder that real learning, it isn't something you just receive. It's something you do. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.